choose the framework version as .NET 3.5, right, and create this. This will not give you all the fancy UI that you see there. That's fine. I just want to showcase it to you, and I can also use IIS Express for this. Okay, just build this. Okay, so here you go, and run this as well. And now, when this application is popping up, you can actually see that show all applications will tell you there are a couple of applications running in a mission, and one of them is using the .NET version 2.0. Why is that? I chose the .NET 3.5 as the framework version, right? But it still says .NET 2.2. Why? Yeah, the runtime version is still the .NET, the core CLR version, which is the ASP, the .NET version, MS Core DLL, that actually is still .NET 2.2, even though you are running .NET 3 or 3.5. So it actually lists you all the applications running in your machine with the framework version, and you can find out which one is not performing well. You can stop one of these applications, or you can stop all the applications together. That's a small way of finding out the applications running on your machine. You can even use it on your server missions, but it cannot scale for production. That's the only thing. You can use the IIS Express for production missions also, but you don't scale for a large number of users. That's a problem there. Again, this is specific to your mission, so you cannot share this with other users in your network. People from other missions cannot access your IIS Express there from here, right? But the good part is that you can also go to the properties of IIS and change, for example, let's go to the properties window here. Here we can go and set the, once again, hold on. Let me just close this. Let me close this web application 6 also. So we only have our .NET 4.0 application. You can actually go and enable the I don't know where it is. I'll show it to you in a second. You can even go and enable SSL from here. I'll just quickly show it to you. Here is where you can actually set it permanently to choose your Visual Studio Development Server or IIS Express, or you can override this behavior right from here. So this is something that will help you to build applications which are faster when you run locally than compared to your local Cassini web server that you are used to when you run Visual Studio. And the other thing I talked about is the SQL Express edition or SQL Server Compact edition that I talked about to you. So that you can do from here. You can quickly go to data, and you can see that there is a SQL Server Compact 4.0 local database that's available here. This is again a flat file-based database structure that you can use for storing simple values. It has a limitation of 2 GB. After that, you can't be able to store there. But up to 2 GB, you can store a lot of information in this table. It doesn't have any dependency for database installation. When you're creating a simple application and want to deploy it, you can just do an Xcopy deployment or just package it along with your application and go and put it for publication. So even if your hoster does not support SQL Server CE, it doesn't really matter because this can actually go as a file to your production environment. So if you are creating a database, it comes with the SDF extension, sample. So it's saying that it's a special database type, so it just goes and sits into your app data here. So you can open this from here and you can create tables right from here. You can do all these things here. So you can create a new table right from here, create a column name, say, if you want to say product ID. This table is going to be called products and the column name is going to be product ID. And the type of this is going to be integer. And you don't want to allow nulls for this. This will be made as the primary key as well, right? And then you can create another column, say product name, and this will be nvarchar, that's fine. That's it. So just a simple table or description probably. Nvarchar of probably 400, right? This you don't want to allow null probably, and this you can create this table here. So this will actually give you visualization as well, just like you can do with SQL Server database tables. You can go to Server Explorer and then open this and then click on show table data. It will list you the columns there. You can go and start entering products here, say Visual Studio, development tool, and development tool. So I didn't give the auto increment, so that's why it's giving there. One, development tool, that's fine. SQL Server, database tool, and X. I should have given the auto increment there, that's why it's shouting here. And say expression, it's a designer tool, just simple stuff, right? So 3 records, this can actually go and you can open up your database page here and you can start building your entity framework right from here. So the recommended approach for using SQL C is again using an entity framework model. We don't really encourage people to do directly binding your database queries to your grid view and all. Those days are gone. If you want to make a really scalable application, something which follows architecture, it's always better to go for an entity framework there. And the same technologies that we used earlier will apply to SQL C also. So I can go ahead and add entity model for this. So add new item, entity. Entity data model is here, so I can go and give sample as the name of this and generate from my sample.sdf file here. This is what we just created now. So this is retrieving the information from database. There's only one table that we created for sample. So we're going to quickly pop that up. So tables, you have one table which we want to add to this. This can generate entity for this. So this, from design, I can go and choose entity. Just a second, it's going to pop up my entity model here. And from here, I can go and say that it's going to be from my sample entities that I just created. Right. Products is the name of the entity that we created, and I'm just going to select all of this stuff here. So just to make it a little better, I'm putting a template here. It's very simple stuff, but what you see here is that, oh my God, what you see here is that I am using a SQL C database for my data structure. I don't have a SQL Server application running there. So you can see that my database records are coming up here, right? So what's special here? You don't have to depend on SQL Server for your database. You can simply put values here and then xcopy deploy this there. So when you say xcopy deploy, what it means is that you can go here and then say add deployable dependencies. Okay, so what it's doing now is that it's finding out that you're actually using all these assemblies. One is the ASP.NET web pages with Razor syntax. This is something that's not by default coming with .NET framework. So all of you know about Razor, heard about Razor? Razor and MVC3 is something I showed today morning. I'll be talking about it also now. Razor and MVC3 shipped separately. It's not part of the original .NET framework. So it's finding out that you're using web pages with Razor. Probably you're using it, you're not yet using it. And then saying that it's SQL Server Compact is also used there. So you can just go and bundle your dependencies here. If you're using third-party controls or any other thing, you can actually go and say, bundle these dependencies. It is going to add a list of items to your bin deployables. You can see that here. Bin deployable assemblies now has all the required data or assemblies here. So once you have this, you can actually go and do a xcopy deployment to your server. So I showed you three things here. One is that I showed you the IIS Express part, and I also showed you SQL C where you can go and create tables, manage everything from there. And I bound it to my UI layer. And the moment I have to deploy it, I will worry that, okay, SQL C is not there. What if somebody needs SQL C there? I can just right click and then say, create dependencies, and then it automatically finds out that SQL C is not there. If the DL is required, it will go and bundle it into your bin folder. SQL C probably is not great because you can also go and add it to the bin folder. But if you're using web pages and Razor, that add dependency is a very important feature. You don't have to worry about whether the hoster will be having the DLLs required for running your page, right? So those are the three important things we released in Visual Studio 2010 Service Pack 1. Any questions on this so far? Yeah, so SQL Express Edition is still a little bigger database. It can support up to 4 GB of data. And so the main thing is SQL Express runs as a service on your machine. It's a service, it's a database service that runs there. If you open up your services.msc configuration file, you will see that there will be a service running on SQL Express also, which means that if you are going to use SQL Express on the production, they need to have SQL Express installed there as well, because it's a service that needs to run on the machine, not just a flat file there. But SQL C, you can just deploy it like what I did just now. I didn't deploy it, but I just added dependency. I can go and push it onto the production. It will run fine without having to run or install SQL C on the server. So production environment where particularly you are having a shared hosting, you don't have to worry about installing it on there. Very similar to it, yeah. Very similar to it. Why I didn't say is that because we are going to give support for migrating the SQL C data to SQL Server also. MS Access you don't have that currently, right? In just a few months' time, we're going to release a tool which will allow you to migrate your SQL C data to SQL Express also, SQL Server also, or SQL Express, whichever you want to do. That way, what happens is even when you're having a local development, it's all fine. But when you go to production, you want to have a SQL Server database, you can do a migration of data from here to there. So that way, it becomes much more powerful for you for your end production deployments. You got the answer? Yeah. The main difference is for you, what you asked is, that is a service, there is a flat file. Alright, so this is something I packaged very quickly into this because it just got released and probably you're not aware of these things. But the main intent of the talk was to talk about Webforms and MVC. So all of us know Webform story. It's very easy to start development and deploy. If you are particularly coming from a client development background, like VB6 background. How many of you have done VB6 here? All of us, right? It's right from college projects to production deployment, you have done VB6. If you're coming from the client development scenario, Webforms is quite easy for all of us. And if you want to do things like routing and search engine optimization, you can do it with 4.0 version of ASP.NET Webforms, not earlier. With 4.0, we gave the system.web.routing DLL, with which you can go and configure friendly URLs for your application. One of the problems of Webforms is that it always has this .aspx extension, right? That's kind of old now because if you see the sites today, they have this nice friendly URL patterns, /product, /product name, etc. Because the more and more URLs you have, it will be more and more search engine friendly. And to do that earlier, you have to use URL rewrite or URL mapping in the config file of earlier versions of ASP.NET. But with ASP.NET 4.0, you can actually go and configure routing in your global.asx and say that just like how it works in MVC, you can actually make it work in Webforms also. Pretty simple stuff. Go to the global.asx and add routes, and then you can make your application behave like your MVC application. Better client handling capabilities. So all these features, the last three are actually 4.0 features, if you have not heard. Client handling capabilities is when you put a control like a master page and then you add a control like a grid view control, every element of the row becomes having a big ID. Content placeholder 1 underscore grid view 1 underscore control name 1, etc. That becomes very tedious if you are doing Jquery style of programming on your page, because you really cannot predict what will be the ID of the control that comes there. But with 4.0, we introduced something called as the client ID attribute, where you can go and set that client ID should be in this format there. But I'm not going into those things now. The last thing is productivity and extensibility. Productivity is because once you decide that you want to develop the application, it takes no matter of time for developing and having a UI ready when you are working with Webforms. Drag and drop, configure, database, go and run the application. You can have the application ready, basic layout ready for your Webforms there, right? And extensibility is because you can actually find a lot of third-party libraries today. You see DevExpress, Telerik and all, which have built a lot of controls on above on top of your .NET controls, which are not there in .NET. Telerik controls are there, RAD grid is there. These things help you to do a lot of custom changes to your controls, which are not available by default there. Those things are available when you are doing a Webforms based development. I am going to do a quick Webform development because I have to show the migration part of MVC. So kindly bear with me for that Webforms thing. So I'll quickly go through that. It's a new project, and so hybrid solution. So this is again using the regular Webforms there, but to be with page with MVC, we will probably have a database model as well. So I'll go and click a models folder here, right? And before I start my model, I want to also show you what is that I'm running in my database. If you have not seen the first session, you'll probably be wondering what am I using for my data binding, right? So I built this database called as IPL T20. That is our IPL that's happening right now. I thought instead of using the Northwind database, we'll use something which is interesting. So this is a simple database which has a bunch of relational tables, players, types, teams, matches, etc. And there's a lot of data there as well. Except for that player data, I have put almost all other data, matches, etc. This is the database I'm using for my demo. And from Visual Studio, I can add an entity model for my application. So add new item. And I can choose for entity, search for entity, it gives me the entity model option that is there. So with this, I can go and specify that this is going to be an entity model of IPL T20 or 2020, right? If you came for the first session, you probably find this very similar to what I did, but I did it with MVC, not with Webforms. So generate from database, and it picks up my T20, that stuff that I just gave there. And it's currently now retrieving all the database tables that I have in my database. So I have all these tables here. So except for sys diagrams, I don't need that. I can pull up all the other database tables into my entity model there. So entity model is very powerful when you think about web development in Visual Studio, because it can actually bind to other databases also, not just SQL Server, right? There's a plugin in Codeplex available for making entity framework work with Oracle as well, right? And the entity framework also now comes with the code first model of development, where you can go and create your classes statically and then generate database from there. It's a very powerful method of doing it there. So this is just showing you the visualization of all the tables that we just added to our thing there. So we have an entity model now ready. And if I have to just bind it to my page, I can quickly do it using, so probably I used .NET 3.5, I believe. I think I probably used .NET 3.5. Yeah. Oh my God. I should use .NET 4.0 because I'm going to show the new features of .NET 4.0. Sorry about that. I have to recreate this step once again. Sorry about that. File, new project, .NET 4.0. Let me leave the default name, Web Application 7. Big deal. So because I tried to do the older versions sample for the IIS Express, it actually retained the old value here. So quickly adding the models folder here and add an entity model from ADO.NET. So, and this is going to be IPL T20, same name, right? Very quickly doing it because I'm repeating this step already. And I can pick up all these tables available here and then finish my configuration. Okay, so I have my schema ready now. So let's go to the page. I don't want all these things. I can just remove all these things and just do a data binding of my controls here. So it's another new feature of 2010. You can just type the first keywords and it will automatically generate it for you. If you haven't seen this, for example, if you want to type text box, you can just say T and B. It will generate a text box for you. It will automatically generate it for you. So you don't have to type out everything yourself. So, but I'm going to use the binding here. So very quickly doing that, this is going to pop up my configuration wizard for entity framework. And we will use the, probably I didn't build it properly. All right. And this is configure data source. And entity name is going to be, I have something called B, I don't know what it is. It's going to bomb for me. Okay. Probably, when I tried to build it, I probably changed the name, huh? Okay. This is player types, right? Thanks for reminding. Okay, good. I have really fat fingers, that's what I can see. So configure database, data source here and entities, and I'm going to pick the teams for this example here, right? I'll just leave the defaults here. I don't want to mess up with any of these things. Probably one small thing I missed out is that I need to also give the type filter if I want to do the sorting, etc. Right? That's going to be team. Finish, and just to make it look better, a simple UI for this grid control. So if everything is fine, I could just run this and get the list of teams that are there in the IPL match. All right, so I have the list of teams here that you all probably know already. And one thing I want to do is that I want to, instead of the team ID, which is not probably intuitive, I want to put the team logo there. So I'm going to grab images from my local folder and add it here. Just paste these images here. And instead of the team ID, I will just replace this with the team logo. I'll just use an image URL field for this. Right. Right, so it's going to be, instead of team ID, it's team pictures that I want to showcase. All right, looks good. So we have all the different logos that are there for our team picture. So this is the regular web form development, right? I think that's, yeah, good. Yes. Yes. Currently it is like that, yes. Currently no, that's a limitation there currently, but if you see the code first model of development, you will probably go with that approach in future. That's actually much more powerful than using database and then coming to entity framework. Right. Yeah, there is some workaround. I'll talk about it after this session too, separately. So you can see that this is regular web forms grid that added there here. So now one thing is that whenever you talk about MVC applications, right, you probably want to start doing it as a hybrid solution instead of just starting it from the scratch. It's very easy for me to create applications left, right here, but when you come to real world development, the problem is that you can't really go and change the framework in between a big project. Have you faced this? Leave alone switching from Webforms to MVC, you can't even switch the framework versions of Webforms because the customer says that I don't want to go for .NET 3 or .NET 4. It's not that easy in production development, right? Real world development. And when you want to do MVC based development, it's even harder because you're saying that I'm going to rewrite this from the scratch in MVC. That's kind of scary. Customer would say, don't do that. Just go ahead with whatever is there. But if you want to try MVC out for certain features of your application, the best way to go about is actually using the hybrid solution where you can actually mix and match Webforms and MVC in the same solution, right? So that brings me to the other part of the slide, which is the MVC part here. We already know this, clear separation of concerns. What this means is, now when I added the grid view control, what it did is that it added a grid view control and there is a entity data source sitting on the ASPX page itself. You saw that, right? The data source is sitting on the ASPX page itself and it binds to my entity model that's there in the back end there. So there is always a tight integration between my UI layer and my data access. It's not changing. I probably can add a middle tier, which is WCF or WCF RIA service, but still there is a dependency on my UI layer of where the data is coming from because I've hard coded the entity data source control there. Right? That's the model view presenter way if you can think of, right? But if you think about the MVC world, in the MVC world, you always have this controller view and model based approach, right? We still have the model here now, but we don't have the controller, or rather when I say get products, the action currently doing is that grid view is getting the data and rendering the grid control manually. The control of the rendering is actually happening on the UI layer. Do you agree? The grid is actually rendering the control. Internally, grid calls the render method internally. Render rows method, it calls that and it gets the data and then populates the HTML table for you there. The other problem that you see here is the thing which we all know, the view state, right? You go and see the view state for this, not so pretty, right? And this keeps increasing with your database size going up, like anything, your data size going up. And once you have a view state like this, it's pretty scary if you are going to continue with the grid control interface. So two things there. One is that you can avoid a grid control and use list view control and all. There are a lot of workarounds there. And you can make your records come on a serialized basis, not everything once there. Those things are all there, but still there is an overhead in Webforms in terms of view state, which we are trying to work out very hardly for the next version there. So that is the Webform side I wanted to talk about. And in the MVC, you have the cleaner HTML, right? So I told that the grid is actually controlling the HTML that is rendered there. In the case of an MVC based application, when you say get products, your controller is actually controlling what is coming to the output. The view is just a placeholder. It's like the stage. It just is there, but what comes into the view is actually controlled by your controller. So there is a clear separation of concerns that there. Your model is sitting separately, your controller is sitting separately, and your view is just a representational data. So already you have a 3-tier architecture right out there, and if you add a service layer into it, it really becomes a robust 4-tier architecture for you. All right. Friendlier URLs, I keep mentioning about this. Search engines today look for friendly URLs because that's the only way they can actually traverse between different pages. That's the only way your search engine ranking improves for your site. If you want to do this so the grid control that had only one URL, products.aspx, it lists all the products there. But what if I want to do something like for every product I want a URL, for edit, create, etc. For everything I want a URL, I can do it with a lot of workaround, but it's still not the best way to do that in Webforms, right? Cleaner HTML, already you saw the HTML there. There is a lot of view state chunk there sitting out there. Patterns and repositories, again this clearly does not follow any pattern. Although you can enable patterns and practices using the enterprise libraries, that's not the case by default in case of Webforms. So with MVC, what we can do is that you can create a project separately, but what I don't want to do is create again a file new project there. I told about the hybrid approach, right? So normal cases, what do you need for doing this hybrid approach? So in this case, what I'm using is the ASP.NET MVC3 with Razor, but you can do the same thing for MVC2 also. All right. If you install MVC, what happens is typically it goes and installs in your C: program files x86 Microsoft ASP.NET folder, and inside that it goes and creates folders for different versions of your assembly. Right. It is not even sitting on your. It's not sitting in your regular C: Microsoft framework folder there. Although there is an assembly installed on the GAC, it still is referenced here back because this is installing separately over and above your .NET framework without any dependency on the .NET framework. So you have the different folders that are sitting here for MVC2 or MVC3 running here. So in normal cases, if you want to make your web form application also do MVC work, you need to add a reference to this DLL. In fact, there are a bunch of things I want to show you. Add a reference to these DLLs, go to the configuration file and add settings. I will show you what I did in TechEd. In fact, if you had come for my same talk in TechEd, you would have noticed that I had to do the same thing there. So quickly I'll show you that as well. Just hang on for a second. So this is what I had to do if I have to migrate a web form application, or rather integrate MVC into web form application. I had to add these namespaces, I had to add these assemblies, and then I have to go and do the register route part there. So this is the same thing you will do in case you are not doing what I'm doing now today. I'll show you what I'm doing. This is what you had to do there. You had to go to the routes, go global.asx and say that there is a default controller. In fact, you can actually pick this up from any sample MVC application. If you go and create a new application, in the global.asx, you will find this global.asx route handling there. You have to copy this there, you have to add reference to all these DLLs I'm using there, and then you have to go and unload this project. Very scary, no? Unload the project and open this up, edit this project, and then you have to go and add a key value pair here. You will be adding one more value here, which means that that is the project GUID type ID that you will add here, saying that this is going to be also an MVC project there. But if you don't want to do that, reload the project. This is a simple MVC application. One of the new things that we released recently, or rather releasing it for the last 2-3 months, is the Nuget package manager. Heard about it? The Nuget package manager is something that is a set of assemblies or set of libraries which are independent of .NET framework. You can install them on top of your .NET and MVC, etc., and then they will keep updating automatically because they are all going to be open source libraries. A very good example is Jquery. We shipped Jquery, when we first shipped Visual Studio 2008 with Jquery in the Service Pack 1, the version was 1.3.1. All right. Before we could actually release the next version of Visual Studio, the version jumped to 1.5, and then within a month's time it will go to 1.6. Jquery is a library which keeps updating every month probably, right? It's really very hard for us to keep track of the latest version and put it into your solution automatically there. In those kind of scenarios, we thought that Nuget package manager will be very helpful, because the moment you go and search for new libraries, it will automatically download and install your package manager there. Another thing which is very popular is the Elma. Heard about Elma? Right? Modernizer. All these scripts are actually independent scripts which keep updating regularly, but we don't have a handle of how to keep them updated into your Visual Studio solution. So with Nuget package manager, what you can do is that you can actually go and get all the values, all the latest libraries from the Nuget server that's running there. Say for example, here I can say add a library package reference. Right? This is something new you will see once you install Service Pack 1. You see that there are a lot of options here. Online updates and recent packages. This is specific to your solution. So you can go to online and find out what are all the different, so internet is going to work well for me this. It's actually retrieving all the available packages available there, okay? And look at this scenario. Earlier I had to do a lot of steps, like I had to go to the config file and add all these settings, unload my project, change the project GUID ID, and then reload it back and change global.asx and build it again and do all this. But Scott Hanselman has actually done a neat package called as Nuget package for MVC addition and published it there. That's what I'm going to use currently, which will help you to make your waveform application MVC enabled without you having to do all the steps that I showed there. So it's still trying to get the information because net is a little slow here, but once it's available, you can see that I can go and add that. Let me quickly go and say. It's taking a while because the net is not that great here. All right, let it come up there till then. Right. Once you add the references, you can actually make. I'll show it to you once it's available here now. But the main question that comes for us is all the knowledge I've gained in Webforms. What happens to that, right? If you look at the core ASP.NET, ASP.NET is actually greater than ASP.NET Webforms or MVC because it's the core platform on top of which both of them run there, right? The core ASP.NET has Webforms, which all of us know already, and it also has MVC, which has come up recently. But if you look at the other available patterns like authentication, membership, data providers, etc., these are actually common for both Webforms and MVC, right? If you see the file new MVC application that we created sometime back, it still uses the same authentication mode. You can go and create new users. The same membership API is being used in MVC also. So those things remain the same. Similarly, if you want to get the logged in user, you can still use user.identity.name in MVC also, because it's the same thing for MVC. So things like authentication, membership, data providers, etc. are common across both of them. So there is no loss of knowledge that you actually have when you use MVC or Webforms. And then both of them are actually something that you can develop using Visual Studio 2010. So you still have the same expertise that you gained there. So this has come here now. So I'm going to click on add MVC3 to Webforms, install here. It's going to take a while to install this. It's actually downloading dependencies there. So the Nuget package manager is something interesting. It's an XML file which tells the required dependent assemblies and pulls them down if it's not available already in your mission, and then installs it over and top of your solution there. So not just for this, you can actually install things like Jquery libraries, Modernizer library, or any other script library which is not part of .NET Framework install. So this is now installing it there. So coming back to this slide, right? So if you see the other different attributes there, authentication, membership providers, those architectural patterns are the same for both MVC and Webforms. So the skill that you learned is still the same there, and you can actually use one depending on which one you want to do. A very good example is if you are a SharePoint developer, you still have to use Webforms. There's no other option, right? SharePoint still runs on Webforms. It is not MVC there, and I don't see it go to MVC in the near future. So your Webform skills are still good if you are a SharePoint developer, and I'll talk about more of this. It's almost done there. So what I'm doing currently is the Webforms plus MVC approach that I'm showcasing currently. Right? Why is it important? Like I showed you, ease of adoption in existing projects. So you have a good project running already. You want to try out some features in MVC, but you don't want to really migrate your whole application or rewrite your application in MVC. You can actually use it easily in your existing projects there. Wherever there are pages where you want finer markup control, I mentioned about the default page where you have all the records, but each of them don't have their own page for being a friendly URL. Whenever you require those kind of things, or whenever you want a fine markup control of what's happening there, you can use the MVC plus Webforms approach there. You get the best of both worlds, because things which you want to do very quickly, you can do it with Webforms, and things you want to do manually, granular item, you can do it with MVC. And if you are doing this approach, you don't have to do it from the scratch. So it's almost done there. It just ignore that part which says that operation failed because it did what I did earlier, unloaded and reloaded it there. So now if you see, this has added a few things to these references here, right? All this we had to do manually earlier, but I don't need to do it. You can see that it has added the web.mbc, razor, routing references and all here, right? It has done that automatically. Also, it has created the folder structure required for a MVC based model, which is the controllers, all right? So earlier we didn't have controllers, we only had a model folder. So it already has the default home controller and account controller that you can use there, right? So without any change, if you run this application now, this is a regular Webforms application with what we built earlier, but you can still go ahead and say home and you will get the MVC home screen. Interesting? Are you able to follow me? Is it very boring? Okay. You can actually go to the, you can just type home and you get the home controller there. In fact, if you don't believe, you can actually go and say home and about, which are the default controllers, you get the about view here. So same application, but I got the, but this has nothing, let's build one. That's what it's better here. Again, with the new tools update we released in recently, you actually don't have to write everything manually. So when I say add controller, I can switch and say that we saw the teams already. Let's say we want to see the players. I want to create a players controller, and I can choose that create a controller with read, write, actions, and views using entity framework. If you choose this approach, it will do all the work for you automatically. If you say empty controller, then you have to do it yourself. But if you choose this option, which is controllers with read, write, actions, it will generate all the CRUD operations, create, retrieve, update, delete methods for you, right? The model class for this is going to be, we all know the players, right? In fact, let me go here and say player. That's the model class for this. And the data context for this is going to be IPL T20's entity here, right? And you also have seen this option. You can choose ASPX or Razor, but let's leave the defaults. You can go to advanced options and say that I want to change the layout for this particular file there. It's very important, just note this part. It's very important why this is, I'm showing this to you. And then click on add Again, it's going to do a lot of work. You can see in your right hand side. So it's created the controller, which is okay, but then it also added the different views, and it's opening one by one now. So it went and added the players view. You have the index, edit, details, delete, create, etc. Right? It has done that all for you automatically. If you want, you can delete everything and create it yourself if you have time, but you don't have to do it in normal cases. Index will list all the items here. You can see that. But what's interesting is that when you notice index here, it went and picked up the item, which is team ID, right? So every player has a team, definitely. He used to be in the team there. So ID is a field which is generally an ID value in this players table. If you go to the players table, you'll see that ID value is actually an actual ID value, not the team name value. It went and picked up the team name automatically from there. All right? So let's try running this now. It will throw error because it's still a Webforms application. It is not a change there. So you have to go and change it to players. It goes by the Webforms model where the last worked file will be the file it tries to browse automatically. Right? You can see that when I go to players, it lists all the things. So the team name is coming automatically there, although in my players table, I actually have a team ID value. So it goes and finds out the reference tables also and gets the values automatically. It thought that probably ID is something that you don't want to show. You want to show the name there. That's why it went and put .team name. So it shows all the different values there. So I have a lot of work after this session. I have to go and edit all this matches, runs, etc. But you won't be able to see that. So this went and actually picked up the different values accordingly. So what it did is that internally, the controller here has the different views that you see here. Index is one, details is one, create is one. All of this control what comes to you when you do that. So if you go and say edit something, let me just quickly stop this and probably I'll go there and do it directly. It's already started. Right, so I can go and edit this also and say that R Ashwin is actually Ravichandran Ashwin, right? That's his name, I guess. So it also updates the values there. So it has done create, update, everything there for you automatically, right? And you can see the code to see what it does internally, all right? If you are creating something, it creates it using the model state. If you are updating something, it uses the action result HTTP post for doing this operation. That's what you can see here. It just picks up the reference from your data context and then attaches that after it does all the changes there. That's pretty simple. It does for edit, only for edit you'll find two methods. One is the regular edit method, which will get all the values and put it into the control, and also the edit save method, which will go and save the actual records there. And on the view side, if you see, it automatically has generated all the stub for you. For example, for every model.player ID, it went and generated a label automatically. Similarly, it has given a drop-down list for the team ID, etc. So when you go and select edit the team ID is actually a reference column. So it tells that you can't edit this here. You have to only select some of this from here. All right, that's what it does there. So let me show you the schema of the table here. It makes it much more simple. So tables, show table data. Players has got player ID, team ID, player name, etc. there. That's why it thinks that team ID is a reference column. You cannot go and edit this from here. So let's go and set this as a start page and run this. And instead of default.aspx, if I type players, it's become a little slow, I don't know why. And when I edit this now, if you see, all the things are text box, but this one comes as a drop-down list, right? That's reference columns for you automatically. It looks very similar to our dynamic data sample there, but it does almost similar work here. Only difference is that MVC there. I talked about this friendly URL. So if you see here now, each and every player actually has its own URL. If you go back to the list now, or probably just simply type players. So this one has got its own URL, players/edit/1. You can see that here, right? The bottom you can see that here. So similarly, for every record there is a URL. So it also becomes a friendly URL based site now, right? One last thing I want to do is that reference this in my master page. So when I go to the site master, I have this menu item which is head, about, etc. Here if I want to call this, instead of here I can just simply reference it as players. Text is going to be players. So players is the controller name, not the actual page name. So one last time I want to just show you. When I run this, it's actually a Webforms application, but when I click on players, it becomes a MVC application. All right, so what is the thing that I showed to you about the use the site layout or use a master page, etc. there? If you notice one thing here, it's become very slow for some reason, I don't know why. If you notice one thing here, the master page is actually changing for these two, right? It's not very good for you because you need to have a consistent master page, correct? Currently what happens is that the MVC uses a master page which is site layout.cshtml. That's the master page for MVC based application. This one, Webforms, will use a master page which is site.master, right? Two of them render differently. Site, the ASP.NET Webform renders a control tree structure. It first loads the master page header and then renders the control as a tree for your page there. In the CSHTML world, it actually parses it and then shows it then and there. It doesn't do a control tree structure at all. It just parses the input, gives the output, that's all. It's like a simple parser, like what it was there in ASP or PHP days. PHP is still there, ASP days, it was there. Just a parser renders the output there. So if you want to share the master page between these two there, currently you have to customize it. You have to go to the CSHTML file and add additional steps. I can share the link with you in a while after my session. You can actually go and change the Razor code for the CSHTML file and make it also enabled for Webforms. A little workaround there. Currently, it's not that clean, but that's where we're going forward. We want to make sure that you can use the same master URL layout for your pages also. But if you see that, currently if you see that, it's actually using two different master pages. You still have embedded MVC into Webform, but there are two master pages. But otherwise, it looks pretty good. You can actually go back to home and do all the stuff there, right? So that's like something which is feasible instead of trying to write from scratch. So what are the scenarios? The main intent of the talk is, what are the scenarios for Webforms, right? We get this question always. I mentioned some time back as well. If you're a client developer, I am from VB background, click event based development is your style, then Webforms is probably much suited for you, right? And there are very good performing sites in Webforms also. Sites like Jetairways, Kingfisher.com actually moved to ASP.NET are doing very well in terms of performance. Lots of abstraction and automation is there. You can see that from the control architecture. Drag and drop control does a lot of work automatically. Similarly, entity framework abstraction is also automatic for you. It does a object relational mapping for you, but without you having to write a single line of code. It took all my database tables and then generated classes for it. And on top of it, gave me the methods for accessing the different values of the players table, etc. Markup and scripts and browsers handle differently. One thing you will notice is that when you are in a web form based scenario, you never actually worried about the markup, right? Because it generates it automatically. We take care of doing this. Example, in web forms, if you add a required field validator to your page, all of you know this, required field validator, it just does the same thing, it requires, right? When you run the page on IE, it does a client-side validation. When you run the page on Firefox, it does server-side validation. It doesn't do client-side validation in Firefox or Chrome, whatever it is there. That's because it is able to handle things better in IE on the client side, but when it comes to Firefox, it relies on the server side, right? So that browser difference is handled automatically when it comes to web forms. You drag and drop a validator control, it does two things. It first does the local client validation, and also when you submit the page, it does the page.isValid condition internally. Only if it is valid, it passes the output, otherwise it just stops right there. But if you click on the page and notice that in IE, it will happen instantaneously because it's just the client-side validation. If you run the page in Firefox, it will take a while because it will go to the server and do the validation there and come back. That things are handled automatically there. Scripts, generally, you don't have to worry about these things. Browser references are handled automatically for you. SharePoint runs on web forms, so all the more reasons for you to be on web forms. If you are going for SharePoint development, web part development approach, web forms is the best way to go for in terms of SharePoint development or developing web parts for SharePoint. All right. MVC. This is familiar for the hardcore web developers from the, say for example, Java world or Ruby on Rails world. Right? They are more comfortable doing this kind of approach than going with the client-driven model of web forms. Right? You have the finer control over markup. In fact, if it doesn't do the automatic generation, you can manually generate all the HTML yourself. It just has done that automatically, pasted it there. But if you remove all the code and do the same code yourself, it will give the same result because end of the day, it actually runs everything on the code, Razor code. So it gives you the finer control over the markup than your Webforms approach here. Designed for friendly URLs, I talked about it enough. Every single data item will have a friendly URL unless you expose it, unless you don't expose it to the MVC model. Designed for patterns and repositories, right? If you see this, by default, it actually has a model view pattern already there. On top of it, you can actually go and add things like code first pattern or things like model view model pattern, and then make it really a patterns practice approach for development than the regular web form model. If you go and add a view model view, it makes it as a very good pattern for repository for your application there. So by default, it is designed for patterns and repositories. So there are two scenarios that you saw there. One is when you want to go for faster development and want to develop it very quickly and also go with things like SharePoint, Webforms is the best option for going forward. But if you want to start developing and do a lot of customization yourself, then MVC is a good scenario for developing there. So finally, this application is still there. What is the summary for this? So if you saw the first three samples of IIS Express and SQL CE and bin deployment, I just want to quickly show you once more. You can right click here. You have to stop this application. All right. Let me go here the normal way and stop this. You can right click here and then say add deployable dependencies. It will actually found out that MVC3 is also probably not there on the server. You can select that web pages, SQL Server Compact and click OK. It will bundle all the DLLs to you automatically. You will see that in a second. It does that automatically, and you can also use SQL CE for your database. I don't have it in this solution, but I had it earlier. It actually has added all the DLLs required for the deployment here. So that's one of the reasons why you should download Visual Studio Service Pack 1 and use IIS Express or SQL CE as applicable for development. I already showed it to you there. The application was running very slow when you saw that there. It's probably still using the Cassini web server. You can go to use IIS Express and make it work a little faster. Let's see if it improves my life. Right. So no one size fits all that I talked about already. If you want a clean markup, go for MVC. If you want a rapid development, go for Webforms. Both of them can be used together, like I showcased. Choice is always good, as you would agree. It takes a while, but definitely faster than the Cassini web server, right? All right, that's all I had for sharing. Any questions? I posted this sample here, so you can, if you want, you can note it down. Yeah. Within a MVC, you won't be. Yeah, you can do that. You can do that. You have to reverse engineer the process. You have to. Yeah, you can do that. I'll talk to you. I didn't paste it. I showed that you should be able to paste it there. You can. So what it does is the project GUID ID. Here, if you see the application here, time out. Okay. 1 minute I have. So if you unload this project here, sorry, and open this, edit this project. Here, if you see the project type GUID ID, right? This one has actually added the required thing for me automatically, right? If you see this first one is the MVC3 product type GUID. Okay, that's what enables the add controller option for you. Otherwise, it won't come there. So if you use the package I talked to you about, otherwise you have to manually do this. If you use the Nuget package, it will change this file automatically. All right. Yeah, can come on. Any other question? Okay, thank you.